Don't you just love tiny little fussy cut squares? Don't you just love them? I love them, and I love cutting lots out and sewing them together. Just like this. I cut out 100 1-inch squares, sewed them together, and I had an absolute blast doing it. And today I'm going to show you how I did it and how I made my corners align just perfectly. Just a couple of extra steps and you can have great corners just like this. Once you have all your little squares ready to go, we're going to move over to our ironing mat. We're going to get a piece of Pellon Fusible Featherweight. Now this is Pellon 911FF Fusible Featherweight Interfacing. We're going to lay it down, glue side up. Now the glue side is the side that has these little pimples all over it. That's the glue. Glue side up on our ironing mat. Now the piece, you want it to be a little bit bigger than the layout of your squares. So mine was about 10 by 15, so I cut my piece about 10.5 by 15.5. So you're going to grab your first square, start in the very top corner, put that down. You're going to lay out all your little squares on your Pellon. The key here is to let just a hair's gap in between each square. Just a little bit of a gap in between. And you're going to continue to lay out your pieces and you're going to iron them down. Now you are working with something that has a little bit of glue. So if you have a secondary iron, I would recommend using that. You're not going to get a ton of glue on your iron, but it is possible. If you leave just that little bit of a gap, you should be okay. But just keep that in mind. You are working with glue here for your iron. Now, you're going to iron all of your little squares down. Just keep going and keep ironing them down. All right, now all of the little squares are ironed down, and I went ahead and trimmed the excess interfacing off around the edges. And you'll see that this is very flexible. This particular interfacing does not add any thickness to your project, so it's not going to change the feel of your finished piece. All right, so I've moved over to my sewing machine because we are ready to start sewing. You're going to take your piece and right along the spacing in between your blocks, you're going to have a really easy time to just fold it over, and you're going to sew along this edge. Then you're going to fold over your second one, and you're going to sew along this edge. And you're going to continue and do each one the whole way across. So here I stitched my very first seam, and as you can see, when we open that back up, look how perfectly our little squares are aligned. Now you're just going to keep doing that, all these, and then we're going to, of course, turn it, and we're going to do these lines. All right, now all of our vertical lines are stitched, and you can see how awesome it's looking so far. Everything nice and aligned. Here is the back. Now I like to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but that is not set in stone. Some people like to use a different seam allowance. Now I'll mention, in case anybody was wondering, this is just a little scrap of fabric that I like to use. Some people call it a leader or a starter. I use this to start my stitch because sometimes you get these weird, funky stitches on the first couple stitches. So I use that so those weird stitches don't get on my project. Not necessary, but I like to use them. It keeps my stitches nice and neat. So now that we did all of our vertical lines, we're going to have a step before we start into the horizontal lines. So flip your project over, and your stitches that you put in here caused a seam, so that if you would try and fold this over and stitch, see, your seam is going to go one way or the other, and we want to cut that open so that way we can have a nice flat seam and reduce bulk at the end. So you're going to take a little pair of scissors, and in your seam you're just going to cut it open. So I'm just going to put my scissor in and cut along the edge, so that way that opens up that seam for us. So you just want to do that on all of your seams, and then we'll be ready to sew the other way. All right, so I cut all of my seams open on the back, and I gave them a quick press with my iron, press them all open. So now we're ready to flip it back over and stitch on our horizontal lines. So it's going to be the same method. You're going to fold it over and see how all your seams are open. Just double check they're all open, and you're going to stitch along that edge, and we're going to do all of them all the way down to the bottom until we're all through stitching our long lines. All right, now we have all of our stitches done. Look how awesome that looks. Now we're going to do the same step that we did before within the seam that we just sewed. We're going to take our little scissor and we're going to cut that open. You're going to go ahead and do that for all of your stitches and then give it a nice press. So back over on my pressing mat, I had finished cutting open all of my seams and giving it a really nice press with a hot iron. Now, remember, you are working with that interfacing that does have glue. So when you trim them open and you press, some of that does get exposed. So make sure you give it a really good press on the back. And before you do any pressing on the front, just check your iron. Sometimes you might get a little bit of glue on there, and we don't want that on the front of our project. So then we can flip it over, and you can give it a nice little press or not. The interfacing makes it really nice, just gives it that little bit of stiffness, not too much, to make it really nice and crisp. And check out those points. They are right on. So there you have it. Now we have a really awesome and adorable perfect points little patchwork project. I love making these for fun. Lots of people put these to use in pouches, in tote bags, on the back of denim jackets. I've seen that recently and I need to do that. But anything you want to do with these are really fun. They're just fun to make. And frankly, you don't need to have a reason to make it. It's just fun. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, I would really love if you would subscribe to my channel. I'm going to add lots more videos and help you make really fun, adorable projects.